I, Riley Baxter, am a patient man. Some people confuse patience with wimpiness. I'm not weak. Surely some of you must think I'm of the I don't get mad, I get even variety. Wrong. I'm a revenge hurts more than it hurts kind of guy. Not many people know this because by biding my time, I've been able to exact revenge without harming myself. Most people probably think I'm a wimp, but I warn you, don't do anything that might incur my wrath. My wife, Farah, waited 17 years into our marriage to capitalize on her perception of me as a weakling. As soon as our daughter was old enough to drive, Farah decided she no longer needed to be a homemaker and started working as a personal assistant for her friend from church, Al Baker, who ran the local office of an accounting firm. She seemed to enjoy it and will have more money for retirement. That's assuming she didn't have to buy more clothes suitable for the office than for home. How did I know about her betrayal? First of all, I'm also a suspicious person. My wife has always been very attractive. Decent breasts, great legs, and a better-than-average ass. Men noticed her, but their jaws only dropped, not dropped. Now that she's almost 40, she seeks validation of her attractiveness more openly, usually from other men. I've always had an advantage over other potential cuckolds. I saved Jimmy Reston's life during Desert Storm. Not that I was a hero, but in saving my own skin, I just as easily saved his. Anyway, he said he would always be in my debt. His debt was repaid many times over with all the personal investigator services his firm provided me for free. 5 times in the first 17 years of our marriage, I thought something was wrong, and I asked Jimmy to look into it. 5 times it either turned out not to be true, or Farah or her potential lover changed their minds before things got really serious. The clue to the last suspicion was that she was being nice to me. I know it may seem strange, but you get used to a certain level of niceness on the part of your spouse. A decrease or increase in the level of niceness can be a sign that something not good is going on. As usual, I called Jimmy and told him about her new job, hence the routine. It took less than 10 days to get the photos, the report, and the audio recording. The biggest surprise to me was that Farah's lover turned out not to be her boss, Al. Instead, she had a long lunch once a week with one of the young accountants. They would meet at a local motel known for charging by the hour. It was so familiar to Jimmy's private investigator firm that they had a standard agreement and fee from the motel owner to get evidence on potential adulterers. So what did I do with the information I got? I waited. I'm a patient man. Although we had a daughter staying at home, she was soon to leave for college. Her college fund would not be affected. A divorce would hurt my wife and me financially about equally, and me even more than her. I asked Jimmy to gather as much information as he could about the accountant and his family, especially his wife. After finding out that his wife was a piece of work, I enlisted the help of a neighborhood feminazi who had gone through a nasty divorce. She wasn't interested in talking to me at first, but when she found out she could help tighten the screws on the cheating bastard, she agreed to do it without payment. However, I wasn't surprised when Maggie later changed her mind and took the money. Maggie found out where the accountant's wife went during the day and, by coincidence, kept running into her. They developed a friendship based mostly on banter with their husbands. One topic of discussion was what they would do if they caught an unfaithful husband. Although the affair had stopped in the last few months, I used to send my accountant's wife pictures from the motel. I only sent the ones that didn't show my wife's face. A few days later, the news did a quick story about a man whose wife cut off his dignity with scissors, apparently because of his affair. I noticed that my wife looked particularly upset that day after work. Naturally, I asked what was the matter. Farah said that one of the accountants she worked with had been hospitalized due to an accident and would probably not be able to return to work. She felt very sorry for him and his family. I asked if she was going to visit him in the hospital. Farah quickly shouted, "No!" before realizing how emotional her reaction was. In response, she said, "I didn't know him that well. There was no need to visit him. Why don't we change the subject?" I agreed, but I found it hard not to smile. My wife continued to be amiable for a while longer, and then we went back to the way things were before her cheating. I was still waiting for the right opportunity to get back at her when she started being amiable again. You know the drill: Jimmy, private investigator, stakeout, and report. This time, however, there were no photos or audio recordings. The private investigator was sure she was doing it with her boss, Al, in the office. He just didn't have proof. We coordinated a series of phone calls, me to Farah and the fake clients to Al. By method of elimination, we found out that on Thursday afternoon between 1 and 3 o'clock, both Al and Farah were in a conference call so they wouldn't be disturbed. Close, but still not proof. Finally, we were able to bribe the night janitor to put a tape recorder under the conference room table on Wednesday night and put it away the next night. On Friday, we had the audio proof we needed. You know what I did? I waited. I'm a patient person. When our daughter left for college, I was ready. I guess this is where I have to admit what a hypocrite I am. Part of the reason I could be so patient while my wife slept with another man was because I enjoyed the pleasures of my secretary. When I hired a new secretary, I chose her based on my need for money and my lack of a husband-boyfriend. Sissy was a single mom and desperately needed a job. We quickly agreed on duties not listed in her job description and extra money from the accounting department. We were both pleased. It was agreed that if she found someone to marry, she would return to secretarial work with a normal salary. Now back to Farah and Al. Again, information about his family. Although I knew Al and his wife Mildred socially, I was not privy to their personal history. Mildred was large and rather rough, while Al was small and smooth. I think women would say he was charming. When I found out that Mildred was a college softball star, I had an idea. I invited Mildred to lunch on Cheating Thursday. I told her about her husband's and my wife's cheating. At first, she didn't believe me. I turned on a tape of him talking about what a bitch his wife was and how he enjoyed my wife much more than his own. I drove Mildred into a frenzy and we drove to their office. When we got out of the car, I handed her an aluminum softball bat. Mildred smiled. We walked past the suddenly agitated receptionist and headed into the conference room. The smoked glass of the locked door withstood no more than one swing of the bat. While Mildred unlocked the door, I managed to snap a picture of the partially clothed couple. She started with the husband first. The blow to the top of his head caused him to raise both arms up, which in turn caused him to be exposed in the front. The spiky tip of her high-heeled shoe turned his formerly powerful organ into a would-be useless nozzle. He slumped into a fetal position. Her attention shifted to Farah. Mildred focused on her head. Farah had covered her face, resulting in the destruction of her arms in addition to significant damage to her skull. Somehow, Farah retained consciousness, which was not in her favor. While Farah was conscious, Mildred continued to abuse her. I almost felt sorry for Farah, but finally she passed out. Mildred stopped. I pulled her over to a chair and sat her down. I knew it was only a matter of time before the building security and the city police would be there. Mildred and I were content to wait for them. Suddenly, Mildred jumped up and kicked her husband again. I was about to stop her, but she declared that she had had enough and sat back down. Mildred was charged and convicted of aggravated assault and attempted murder. She was completely calm during the trial and even considered playing the tape as a mitigating factor. She received 10 to 15 years. Mildred adapted well to prison, becoming a gangster for one of the most violent gangs in her prison. She also planned to enjoy the proceeds from her lawsuit against Farah for alienation of affection, her divorce from Al, and her lawsuit against the accounting firm for failing to comply with the non-brotherhood policy. I was charged and convicted of accessory to aggravated assault and attempted murder. A sentence of 5 years in prison was commuted to probation. The tape was a mitigating factor, as it had been in Mildred's case, but the main one was that Farah's injuries were so serious that she would need a caregiver for the rest of her life. Her insurance did not cover nursing home care and only very limited in-home care. Although she appeared to have mental capacity, she was unable to speak, walk, or use her hands. She had to be fed either liquids or pureed food. Her only relatives were myself and our daughter. Our daughter had just gotten married and was pregnant with our first grandchild. She was unable to care for her mother and lived so far away that it was difficult for her to even visit her. I was the only caregiver option, and that was only acceptable as long as Adult Protective Services kept an eye on me. Some people thought I got off easy because of what I did. Some people thought that by having to care for her for years, I had suffered a well-deserved punishment. I was determined to make it easy. In public, I was the dedicated sacrificial wimp I was supposed to be, and I did push the wheelchair a little, lift, carry, wash, wipe, dress, and so on and so forth. But most of the time, I hired caregivers to do all of that. As with the receptionist, I looked for pretty women who needed money. When I thought one of them might be a potential caregiver, I made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. Non-disclosure agreements are not uncommon in the healthcare industry. This agreement stated that I could sue the job applicant if she refused the job because I had asked for special care for me as well. When it came to offering sex on the side, I wasn't so blunt. I would tell the applicant how hard it was for me not to be able to make love to a beautiful woman who now had the abilities of a mannequin. And then I would cry. Crying and a salary well above most similar jobs solved the issue with the women I was hiring. If you think my revenge was now complete, you don't know me well. Sometime later, I told the caregivers that my wife's doctor believed that she could regain some of her abilities if she was shaken in some way. Then I said that my wife was so sure of my fidelity that the shock might be that I was having sex with other women. No, I didn't start having a sitter in front of my wife, but I did the following. I videotaped our sex and showed my wife the DVDs, whispering in her ear that this was part of my revenge on her. The first few times I showed the video, she had tears in her eyes. The last few years have been great. Everyone thinks I'm a saint for taking care of my infirm wife, at least those who don't know about the fact that I set her up to be beaten. I get great sex from 2 or 3 women on a regular basis. I have a lot of money from a lawsuit against Al and Al's accounting firm. Mildred and I exchanged money with him, as well as my own pension and investments. Farah's friends faded as she did not respond to their attempts at socializing, and their enthusiasm waned. They were only allowed to come over at certain times so as not to distract me from my care. The only exception was her friend Glenda. Glenda takes her to church with her and likes to drive her around town in nice weather. She's a little churchy for me, but it gives me a respite that I don't have to pay for. She has now taken Farah to a revival event with renowned faith healer Benny Robertson. Glenda believes in this kind of thing. She is going to keep Farah overnight, which gives me time to write this story. I don't know who will read it, but I had fun writing it. Farah. The cell doors opened with a clang and then closed. Footsteps were the only thing to be heard in the long, sterile hallway. 2 conservatively dressed men, accompanied by a guard, entered the interrogation room. With disheveled hair, they looked as if they had been licked by a huge cat. Before going inside, they peered through the double-sided glass and saw a woman in an orange suit chained to a ring on a table. The first man said, "She doesn't look like a psychopathic killer to me." The guard replied, "Do you want to talk to her or not?" "Sorry, just commenting. Can we talk to her, please?" "Isn't that why you're here? Just don't get too close. I'll be watching from the window if you need help." The men looked at each other as if not realizing the danger. Nevertheless, they approached the table cautiously. "Can we sit down and talk to you?" Farah replied, "I suppose so. At least it will save us from the routine. What do you need?" "Well, we're employees of the Reverend Benny Robertson. We've been told that from Reverend Robertson's touch, you have had a delayed reaction healing of tremendous power. Is that true?" "Yes, so what of it?" "I don't know if you've been following the news, but Reverend Robertson has been heavily criticized lately for falsifying some of the healing claims that occurred during his crusades. We have been gathering evidence of his successes, and we have been told that you may be his most significant healing that can be medically proven. We hope you will agree to cooperate with the research that needs to be done to establish the proof." "And what's in it for me?" "I suppose you know that a born-again Christian was just elected governor of our state. He believes in the spiritual gifts that God says men can possess, such as speaking in tongues and faith healing. We believe he will be inclined to commute your sentence if you help us. If all goes well, you could be free in a few months." Farah stood up quickly. Yes, so abruptly that blood rushed from where the handcuffs clawed at her wrists. "Parole? You idiots think I want parole? You don't know anything about what happened, do you?" One of the men nearly fell to the floor from shock. "I'm sorry if we've upset you. Please sit down. You're right. We really don't know what happened. Could you please tell us so we can understand?" As she lowered herself into the chair, she seemed to notice her bloody wrists for the first time. Noticed, but didn't pay it any mind. She began her story with how she first met Riley Baxter, about their marriage, the affairs and consequences of being married to a patient man. Eventually, she got to the day she was taken in by Benny Robertson's crusade. My friend Gloria took me to the arena. She took me to the wheelchair-accessible section on the floor. It was crowded, and the staff was going around people to decide who would be asked to come on stage for personal healing. At first, the staff passed me by, but Gloria was adamant that I go on stage. After a spirited altercation with the staff, she prevailed, and I ended up in line. When he finally approached me, he was told my story of how I became disabled. He asked everyone to pray with him by touching my head. I felt a surge of electrical energy enter my body. I knew immediately that I was healed. But at that moment, you didn't react in any way to the fact that something had happened? Who's telling the fucking story, you or me? I'm sorry. Please continue. Benny knew something was wrong. He predicted that my healing had happened, but it would take a few days for the full effect. He tried very hard to get contact information on me and Gloria so that his staff could follow up. Truth be told, I had been thinking for years about what I would do if by some miracle I could recover. Even though part of my brain said it was a futile endeavor, it was the only thing I lived for. When I found out I was going to Benny's, I already had a plan in place in case I was healed. When I felt healed, I didn't move. Believe me, it was very hard not to jump out of my wheelchair and scream to the heavens. But I didn't. It was part of my plan. That night, I stayed with Gloria. After she went to bed, I began to see what had been healed. My muscles had atrophied, but I could walk with some difficulty, could move my arms and, to a lesser extent, my hands. I could speak in a whisper. I felt fine, except for the fact that I had fooled my friend Gloria. She was shocked that I wasn't healed. Back home, I continued to feign helplessness. When Riley was out of sight, I got some sleeping pills. Later, after he'd had a few, he needed to urinate. This was my opportunity to slip the pills into his drink. After an hour or so, he passed out completely. I went to work. I felt euphoric. I took off his pants and underwear. I took a catheter and inserted it into his dignity. Then I took the superglue and applied it to the catheter until it went all the way in. Slowly, I pulled the catheter out, continuing to sprinkle as I progressed. When his urethra was filled with superglue, I went into the bedroom to the drawer of toys that Riley used with some of his girlfriends. I found a butt plug. Coating the end and sides with superglue, I quickly inserted it into his, then sealed the end. Have you ever heard the old joke about body parts arguing that each is more important than the other? The eyes made their arguments, then the mouth, then the ears, and so on, until the anus claimed to be the most important. To prove their point, each body part stopped functioning. After a few days, they all gave up and admitted that the asshole was the most important. After a few days of Riley not being able to pee or poop, I understood the joke much better. "Oh," he begged me wordlessly, "the caregivers will come and find me." It was easy. I just put a note on the door that he was sick with something contagious, but he could still take care of me. He would call when he needed them again. Then he said that the Bible says that the best way to deal with enemies is to be kind to them by pouring coals on their head. I liked the idea of using real coals, but it was too messy. He went on to say that he loves me so much that the thought of me having another man just drives him crazy. Can't I give him another chance? "Bullshit," was all I said. For the next few days, I ignored his rants, which amounted to how much he loved me and threats about what he would do when he got free. His physical condition deteriorated rapidly, as the toxins that would normally be excreted outside remained and festered inside. When he started vomiting his own feces, I took that as a signal that it was time for me to run. I exercised and was confident that I could now drive. The next morning, I managed to withdraw a substantial amount of money and drove north about 500 miles. At this time, I called the police to find that there had been a disturbance at the house where I used to live. I told them that I was a concerned neighbor and did not want to identify myself. After the call, I headed west and drove until I no longer wanted to go. I found a country town and rented an apartment that used to be a motel room. The town had a few good restaurants and pretty good internet. What more could I want? The answer: brains. I didn't realize that Riley had installed a computer chip in my car by which it could be easily detected. I later learned that he had lived and told the police about the locator chip. I was soon extradited back to stand trial for attempted murder. The worst part was watching the smirk on Riley's face in the courtroom. At least I enjoyed it when his colotomy bag ripped open and made a mess of the courtroom. He'll think of me every time he has to excrete waste products because it will have to be done in ways he never imagined before. Farah sighed. She was ready to finish her story. Now, do you see why I don't want to go out? The two young men looked at each other. Both had questioning looks. Maybe I'm a little slow. Could you please explain in more detail? He's alive, you idiot. He thinks of ways to get back at me every day. I'm in the safest place to avoid his revenge. Even here, I'm constantly on guard. He has the cunning to get me here. There's a reason I'm a stiff donkey here. I find myself in a burrow, which is the safest place on earth. The only reason I'm still alive is because I get the satisfaction of knowing that he knows I'm alive and hasn't gotten to me. Interrogation over! Guards! After the results of their visit were presented to Reverend Robertson, their asses were chewed off to the fullest. They were ordered to go to Riley Baxter and see if there was any way or amount of money that would make him promise not to hurt Farah and keep her out of jail. With their tails tucked, the young men set off for the Baxter house. Riley. Well, I'll end this story. Even though that bitch was very close to the ultimate revenge, I have to give her credit for that. That's going to be hard to top. Anyway, I got a visit from those two religious robots from that sorcerer guy who supposedly faith-healed Farah. By the way, I think my shocking sex tapes were the reason for her recovery. Anyway, these two tried to get me to promise not to harm Farah if she was released. Of course, I thought about lying, but Farah wouldn't buy it. I know she has 7 more years left to serve. I can wait. I'm a patient man. The last few months have been rough. My wife Catherine was having an affair with a coworker, and everyone in the world seemed to know about it. But no one had the courage to say anything. I was just as guilty as everyone else. For some strange reason, I hoped it would just end, and everything would go back to normal. Of course, that was a fantasy, because things would never be the same again. We had been married 19 years and had 3 children. Rob was 18, the oldest. Catherine was pregnant when we married. A year later, we had Donna, and the next year, Darcy came along, and I had a vasectomy. They were good kids, and we never had a problem with them until recently. Needless to say, the problems with the children were caused by their mother's extracurricular activities. For the past 3 years, Catherine had worked in the claims department of a large insurance company. When she started working overtime, several nights a week, the kids and I noticed it quickly. She got a new haircut and joined a gym. Her lingerie drawer got a little sexier, but I didn't like it. Donna and Darcy had seen her having lunch with her department head at a fancy restaurant, but she never mentioned it. In desperation, I decided to follow her like a lovesick puppy. Her trips to motels with her lover were frequent and daring. Although I saw no need to do so, I did record the times and dates of several of their encounters. As the affair dragged on, the family began to disintegrate. All of this was happening without any conversation. The children were angry at their mother for cheating. The kids were mad at me for not arguing with their mother and trying to keep the family together. I was too dumb to realize it was a hopeless cause. The family would only get together for an evening meal. Even then, it was an ordeal. There was almost no conversation, and as soon as each of the children finished eating, they would quietly disappear, usually out of the house before bedtime. John, I can't take this attitude from the kids much longer. If you don't do something to dissuade them, I will. I'll take care of it. You've been saying that for a month. I don't know what's gotten into them. Why are they acting like little brats all of a sudden? If you have a solution, see if you can get some questions answered too. Oh, that wouldn't be the problem. The problem would be how to work it out. I think we're going to work it out now. Are you going to let me in on this, or is it some big secret? No secret. I'm going back to my parents tomorrow. Catherine wasn't happy with this news. She stopped clearing the table and sat back down, plopping heavily and resolutely into her chair. What the hell are you talking about, John? You can't commute to work from Frackville, and I can't take care of this place and the kids by myself. How does that solve anything? Actually, Catherine, you won't have to worry about taking care of the kids. They're coming with me. I didn't expect to see the frowned eyebrows and pinched lower lip I was rewarded with, but I fully expected it. Leaning her elbows on the table, my loving wife leaned forward and looked me in the eye. "There's no way in hell you're leaving this house with my children. Whatever gave you the idea that you could get away with such foolishness?" "They will?" Catherine sighed irritably, stood up, and began to clear the table again. She mumbled something to herself, but I couldn't make it out. After tossing the last china into the sink, she turned around. "Why? Why is this happening?" "My best guess is that they're tired of being embarrassed." "What the hell are you talking about?" "Basically, it's about your affair with Brian Masterson. You flaunted your infidelity to the point where it became known to the entire family. You show no respect for your children or me." "What? Are you going to deny it? Are you going to tell me you don't spend several days a week having sex in different motels? Are you going to tell me I don't understand?" I decided I didn't want to continue this conversation any further. The easiest thing to do would have been to throw it all in her face, but I didn't have the guts. I pushed back my chair and left the room. Catherine was standing at the sink with her hand on her hip. I noticed the defiant look on her face, as if she were provoking me to stammer about her infidelity. I got the feeling she'd been teasing me the whole time so she'd have an excuse to stop feeling guilty. It was a lecture I wasn't going to listen to tonight. I had no desire to hear that I had forced her to seek solace elsewhere because I was a mediocre husband and a worthless lover. Sure, I could accuse her of being promiscuous, but in the end the blame would still fall on me. I knew Catherine, and I knew she had pre-planned everything she was going to say. My best option was not to talk at all. "What about your job?" "I'm quitting." I heard her shout my name as I walked out the door. I had no idea where the kids were. All their clothes and personal belongings were loaded into Rob's Subaru. The van had over 100,000 miles on it, but I figured it had another 100,000 left in it. All my clothes and personal documents were in the trunk of my Jeep. Catherine didn't notice any of this when she got home. We all agreed that anything we didn't manage to get out on the first trip we could come back for later. I was sure Catherine had been looking around the house when I left. There was no turning back now. I decided I should call Donna. Donna always seemed to be in control. Rob was older and a man, but he had no problem letting Donna call the shots on most matters. "Donna, it's Dad. Are you still home?" "No, I'm on my way to the motel right now. I should have told your mother what was going on, but I didn't say why. I think it's best if you guys find a place to stay tonight. Can you get a hold of Rob?" "No problem. Darcy and I are going to stay at Betsy Cooper's. I'm not sure if Rob has any plans, but I think I can get in touch with him." Okay. Meet me at the Waffle House on Lancaster Pike at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. We can go to Frackville from there." "Dad, was Mom mad?" "I think so. I'll tell you about it tomorrow." "Oh, after you call Rob? Maybe I'd better turn your cell phone off." After checking into the Desca Motel, I turned off my cell phone. I had just finished showering when there was a knock on the door. I opened it expecting to see a furious Catherine, but instead I saw a smiling Rob. There weren't many motels in town. By 7 o'clock the next morning, we were on our way to the coal regions. Catherine and I never had time to discuss my situation at work. It didn't matter because I was now unemployed. In this environment, it's usually customary to stash away as much cash as you can without giving the appearance that you're doing so. If I filed for divorce, I would have to go through asset declaration and equitable distribution. I decided to hell with it. No one likes to have their credit score skyrocket, but under the circumstances, it seemed like a good idea. If I didn't work, the kids could qualify for lots of grants and other benefits when it came time to go to college. I'd make sure they got everything they needed, but it probably wouldn't be entirely fair. Living with Mom and Dad would also cover a lot of other normal expenses. I was pretty sure Catherine wouldn't wait too long before filing for divorce. I would probably agree to whatever she demanded just to end the marriage. There wasn't much she could get since I didn't have a job, and the kids wouldn't go with her even if they were ordered to. All I could do now was sit back and wait. I had a basket of lemons, and I was going to make lemonade. It was great to be back in my hometown. The last time I lived there was just before I left for college. After graduation, the closest place I could find any kind of decent job was Reading. Catherine was originally from Baltimore, so she didn't mind being only a few hours away from home. We got married shortly before I started my last semester at the University of Pennsylvania. Catherine never finished it because of her pregnancy. She never had any desire to go back to school. I think she was studying to get away from her parents and find a husband. Anyway, I won the marriage lottery. My reward was 3 wonderful children and a bitch wife. Sure, I had regrets, but I wasn't the type to dwell on the past. I didn't realize my past would catch up with me so quickly. Since I had a lot of old friends in the neighborhood, it wasn't that hard to find a temporary job. I was saving as much money as I could to keep it out of Catherine's hands. Things wouldn't be easy until she finally got her divorce, if she did. All 3 kids got involved without waiting for an invitation. Under the circumstances, I think they felt obligated. I didn't leave Catherine because they wanted me to, but they seemed to feel that way. Mom and Dad were reluctant to take money from us, though I don't think it was necessary. They didn't want me to feel like a beggar. Catherine called 2 weeks later and asked if I was going to pay the mortgage. I told her I wasn't going to. 2 weeks later, she called me to let me know that her automobile insurance needed to be renewed. I gave her the same answer. Catherine tried to strike up a conversation about the affair. She tried to be apologetic and sincere, but she failed. I listened patiently as she recounted how her friendship with Masterson had begun and how it had developed into a full sexual relationship. She assured me that it was just a physical attraction and nothing more. After a few minutes, she realized how ridiculous it all sounded and stopped talking halfway through. I didn't answer. "I'm sorry, John. I have no excuse for what I did. I'm truly sorry." She stopped calling after that. I think my wife eventually realized that the marriage could not be saved and filed for divorce. She was faced with making the mortgage and car payments and all the utilities. Of course, I was obligated to pay these bills, but I felt that since thousands of other hopeless fathers avoided such things, I might as well. At this point, it was worth the risk. I signed the papers and power of attorney to sell the house as soon as I received them. Now, it was just a matter of time. Catherine had asked for nothing more than the house. After paying expenses and commissions, she didn't have much money left. Rob was collecting all his paperwork for college. We had to stay in the state to pay tuition. Most grants would be hard to get because I would have to provide a copy of last year's income tax. I was able to explain my current employment status and get some of them to waive the income payment. Unfortunately, Rob had other, more pressing concerns. My past was coming back to haunt me, and he was finding himself in the middle of things. "Dad, I have a little problem." "I suppose you think I can help you." "I met a girl a few weeks ago, and I really liked her." At least the conversation started on a high note. Rob had dated a few girls in high school, but hadn't shown serious interest in any of them. It was nice to hear him admit that he could have a long-term relationship. "I'm sure you don't mean the birds and bees conversation." "No, I think I handled that one. I met her mother for the first time, and as soon as I introduced myself, she got upset. After I left, she told Shannon that she couldn't go out with me anymore. She had never done that with any of her previous boyfriends. Her mother didn't give her any further explanation. I think Shannon was a little pissed at her mother because she finally agreed to back off, but only if you talk to her. Let me get this straight. This girl's mother will let the 2 of you date, but only if she talks to me first?" "That's pretty much it. Shannon said she's never done anything like this before." "I think I can find the time. You'll organize everything and let me know where and when." Rob left the room with a wide smile, and I sat there wondering why this woman would want to date me before approving their relationship. That evening, Rob drove us to Shannon's house. It was an old little house located just off the main street. The house was badly in need of painting, and the tile sidewalk should have been leveled years ago. Shannon was waiting for us at the front door and opened it anxiously as we approached. Hi, I'm Shannon." She was cheerful and sweet. I could see why Rob liked her. "We really appreciate it, Mr. Rischel. I'm sorry to have to ask you out like this, but my mom insisted. I hope you don't mind." "Don't worry about it. I'm sure we can get this all sorted out in no time." "Mom, Mr. Rischel is here." My heart sank when my old high school and college sweetheart Abigail Connor walked into the room. "Hi, John." "Hi, Abby." The words flew off my lips automatically. There was an awkward silence in the room, which Rob quickly broke. "Do you 2 know each other?" She kept her eyes on me. "Your father and I went to school together." Shannon seemed excited about the new situation. Well, that should make things easier, shouldn't it? I have fresh coffee ready. I think we'll be more comfortable in the kitchen. I obediently followed her to the back of the house. When I went to sit down, she turned to the children. You two had better wait in the living room for a while. Turn on the TV and don't mess around. I'll call you in a few minutes. Abby went to make coffee, and I went back to my memories. It was the fall semester of our senior year at Penn State. Abby and I had gotten into a fight because I didn't want to come home for Thanksgiving break. She left without me. While she was gone, I partied, got drunk, and was arrested for disorderly conduct. My parents weren't happy, and Abby refused to talk to me when she got back. She was still mad at me when the semester ended, and she went home alone for Christmas. I was at odds with Mom and Dad, so I stayed on campus for the vacations. That's when the bad news came. It was between Christmas and New Year's when Catherine reached out to me. According to her, we had had sex during one of my drinks in a college dorm and she had gotten pregnant. Because of the situation with my parents at the time, I didn't want to upset them further. Without much thought, the two of us drove to Gretna Green the same day and got married. I didn't tell my parents about it until after graduation the following spring. Abby found out about the marriage when she returned to school after a few years of teaching and immediately dropped out. I don't know if she graduated. Did you fall asleep? Her words woke me up when a mug appeared in front of me. She was 20 years older than the last time I saw her and still beautiful. My brain worked feverishly, comparing what should have been and what was. I'm sorry. I wasn't ready for this. You'll have to let my brain get its act together before I can be worth anything. Abby was always easy to talk to, and I always felt comfortable with her. I don't even remember what we argued about before we split up. It was at that moment that I realized I didn't even know her last name from her husband. Rob had never mentioned what Shannon's last name was. It was time to melt the ice. I tried to be calm and open at the same time. Is there a Mr. Abby here? Or are we just going to discuss this alone? She didn't smile at my pathetic attempt at a joke. That's why I invited you here. I'm not looking for anything, but I'm hoping we can avoid the problem. What do you mean you're not looking for anything? John, I've never been married. I tried dating a few guys, but it didn't work out. Most of them weren't interested in single moms and were just looking for easy sex with no commitment. I still don't get it. Damn it, John. You're Shannon's dad. There, I said it. I was hoping I could explain it to you in a more sophisticated way, but sometimes things don't go the way we planned. Of course, I had no idea. Can I get some more coffee? That's it? That's all you have to say? I think I understand why you told them they couldn't see each other anymore. Unfortunately, I think it may have been too late. By the time I found out you were Rob's father, they'd already formalized their relationship. Oh my God. Are you telling me that my son and my daughter are having sex? I'm pretty sure. I thought siblings were supposed to hate each other. The fresh coffee was too hot to drink. I blew on the rim of the cup, and my daughter's mother stared at me, waiting for the wise words I couldn't tell her. Abby, I don't think we have a choice, do we? We have to tell them and hope it's not too late. There was a sudden change of mood at the table. I'm sorry, John, I should have told you, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. You just got married, and I didn't want to ruin it. So instead you decided to ruin your own life? I have a beautiful, smart daughter. I didn't ruin my life. I just had to make some adjustments. I finished my coffee and leaned back in my chair. By the way, John, I don't mean to be intrusive, but where's Catherine? I'm afraid we've drifted apart. I always thought that was an appropriate word, but I never thought I'd get a chance to use it. Oh, I'm sorry I asked. We sat like that for a few moments without saying a word. John, do you want to tell them yourself, or should I? You tell them, and I'll support you as best I can. Less than a minute later, Shannon and Rob were already sitting with us at the kitchen table. Abby handed Shannon a folded piece of paper across the plastic surface. Oh my goodness! Shannon immediately caught Rob's attention, even though she hadn't even unfolded the paper yet. What's going on? It's a mysterious birth certificate that I wasn't supposed to see until I turned 21. Rob looked puzzled. What the hell is so unusual about a birth certificate? Shannon didn't answer. She unfolded the form and stared at it with her mouth open. No! No! It can't be true. It must be a mistake. Mom, tell me it's not true. Abby didn't answer her daughter. She stared at the floor. Rob tried to look at the sheet, but Shannon hid it from him. Mom, please, tell me it's not true. There was still no response. In disgust, Shannon threw the birth certificate across the table and ran out of the room in tears. Dad, what the hell is going on? I'm sorry, Rob. It was hard for us to tell you this, but you need to know. Know what? Holy shit! Shannon's your sister. There was silence in the kitchen. Somewhere far away in the house, we could hear Shannon crying. Rob slowly got up and walked out of the room. I was sure he had a million questions piling up, but he wasn't looking for answers right now. He had better things to do. After a few moments, the sobs became less loud. Abby, you wouldn't happen to have a beer, would you? Abby and I had just finished our second beers when Rob reappeared. Can we go home now, Dad? 2 days later, Rob decided to talk to me again. There was a somber atmosphere in the house, and I was relieved that something was going to happen. I want a DNA test done. I have the money to pay for it, and I won't take no for an answer. Where can we do it? There's a lab in Allentown. Each test costs $200. I need tests on Shannon, you and me. Well, if we're going to go to that much trouble, we might as well get the girls tested, too. I'll foot the bill. Do we have to go there ourselves, or do we have to mail in the test kit? Both, but I'd rather go there. That's fine. You'll get everything ready, and we'll make the most of the day. I'll even take you to dinner at the Olive Garden. That same day, I called my wife's company. I spoke to the head of the company's legal department. He wasn't really interested in my marital status and was quick to tell me so. However, he was interested in how Brian Masterson was paying for the motel rooms he was using. When I mentioned that Masterson was Catherine's supervisor and that I would like more information about the company's policy on adultery, he quickly ended the conversation. A few days later, Catherine called. For some strange reason, she had lost her job and was having trouble paying her bills. She seemed upset when I told her that I couldn't find a job and that I was living on my parents' income. She wanted me to give her enough money so she could move back to Baltimore. She put the house on the market, but things were not going well. She hoped to get out of Pennsylvania before her car was repossessed. She tried again to explain her affair with Masterson, but quickly abandoned the attempt when I didn't say anything back. Although she didn't mention it, I knew that Brian Masterson had also been fired. She never realized what had happened. 2 days later, everything changed. I walked into the house and found Rob and Shannon on the couch, grinning like two Cheshire cats. They just sat there with silly grins on their faces while I coughed. Good. How's it going? Why are your faces so grim? It was a feeble attempt at a joke. They laughed anyway. Do you want the good news or the bad news? Don't you think you're a little wrong? We don't think so. Well, maybe some of it is bad, but overall it's pretty good. Stop messing with my head. Donna and Darcy are both your daughters. The DNA matched. I assume they're happy about that? They don't know yet. What aren't you telling me? Shannon is your daughter, another almost perfect match. I'm still a little confused. Where does the fun begin? Don't feel bad, but I'm not your son. I didn't expect that. I loved Rob with all my heart and raised him the way any good father would. Now he's telling me I'm not his father. I need another beer. The smiles disappeared from Rob and Shannon's faces. Suddenly, things were a little more serious and not so carefree. I returned with a new bottle and plopped into the chair. Dad, this doesn't change anything about our relationship. You're still my father, regardless of what the DNA test says. I don't know who the father was, but you'll always be my father. I'm halfway through a new bottle. I don't know whether to be happy or sad. I don't know if this is good news or bad news. I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. My new daughter and my ex-son just sat on the couch saying nothing. Have you told your mother yet, Shannon? No. Why don't you kids run to her and tell her the news? I've got a lot to think about. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen trying to avoid this situation. They've always been kind. John, if there's anything we can do, please let us know. We won't give advice, but would be happy to help in any other way we can. Dad has always been there for me. I wanted to do the same for Rob. Abby found me a few hours later at the Circle Bar. I don't know how she knew I was there, and I don't remember getting drunk. Looking back, I don't understand why I got drunk. It wasn't that bad, it was just messed up. It had been 10 years since I had last abused alcohol, and now I had no valid excuse for it. I woke up on the couch at Abby's house. Somehow or other, she had gotten me there. I was still dressed, but without shoes. I had peed my pants and was justifiably embarrassed when I realized it. I smelled freshly brewed coffee, but the bathroom came first. When I returned from the bathroom, she was waiting for me at the kitchen table. The bathrooms in these old houses were always on the second floor, so I had to climb the stairs to use it. I won that battle, albeit with difficulty. Abby offered me nothing but coffee, which was appropriate under the circumstances. I really messed up. I don't know who to apologize to first. Looks like you weren't the only one who had sex with Catherine that weekend. You just drew the short straw. Hell, I don't even remember having sex with her. I assumed I did because of the way she approached me. I had no alibi and no way to prove I didn't sleep with her. I took the easy way out, like the ultimate asshole. I must be the biggest simpleton in the world. There was no response from the other end of the table. Finally, she spoke up. Hey, don't look at me like that. I totally agree with your self-assessment. I don't know what to do. I thought the divorce had already started. It is, but I feel like I should be doing something else. I think you should shower and shave now. I was in pretty bad shape. Plus, I felt like crap. Would you give me a ride home? For the next few days, Rob was in high spirits. The girls seemed happy with their situation genetically, but still not happy with the mother they felt they were related to. My mom and dad supported me as much as they could without sticking their nose where it didn't belong. It was much appreciated. Rob was the first to decide that we needed to be more proactive. Dad, I want to make lemonade. What are you talking about? Remember how you always said that if the world gives you lemons, make lemonade? I nodded my head in agreement. Well, we have a bunch of lemons. Let's get started. How proud can a father be? She has to find out, Dad. Mom needs to know who my real father might be. That was in a fraternity, right? That means Mom got pregnant by one of your brothers and he let you take the blame. Is there any way to get her to give you some names? Whoa, you're assuming it was more than one name. You seem to have a low opinion of your mother. Not after what she did to you then and what she's doing to you now. She was a whore, and she still is. How the hell could you stay with her all these years? I ignored the last question. I have an idea. I don't know if it will work, but it's worth a try. That same day, I called my loving wife. I tried to compose in my mind what I wanted to say, but I was afraid I would end up confused and mess it up. Hey, John, what can I do for you? I wasn't expecting your call. From the tone of her voice, I was afraid she might see it as an attempt at reconciliation. I was going to be very careful not to mislead her. I was thinking about our last conversation. You mentioned something about wanting to move in with your sister. Are you still thinking about it? Yeah. Have you figured out how to help me? If you did, I'd appreciate it. I can give you $2,000 to help you get started, but I need something in return. Okay, that'll really help. What do you need? I don't suppose you know I did DNA tests on all the kids. Oh, man. Judging by her muffled exclamation, she had no idea about the tests. I'm sorry, John. I was hoping this would never come up. You and Rob seem to be doing so well. And I thought it was interesting that she mentioned Rob and not Darcy or Donna. What about the girls? I don't know what you mean, John. What about the girls? Weren't you worried about their DNA tests? No, why would I be concerned? Her answer seemed sincere to me, and I decided not to pursue the subject further. I would like to know the name or names of those who are or could be Rob's father. Give me that, and you can have $2,000. The pause on the other end of the wire was much longer than I expected. Catherine, whoever this guy was, he didn't think highly enough of you to make an honest woman out of you. Why do you feel you have to keep any secrets from him? He used you and left you for me. I'm the one who needs taking care of, not him. Okay. Sighs. Okay. There were 3 of them. I don't know which one is the father. I'd appreciate it if you could give me their names. Kyle Simmons, Ray Thorenson, and Philip Berger. I knew them all. 3 spoiled rich kids who thought they could get away with anything. They were all loyal fraternity members, but they weren't very clean. Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate it. What else did you say you wanted, John? If you're not going to stay in this house and you can't sell it, can I have it? Oh, God, yes, I can't sell it, and I'd like more than anything to give it to you. Even if I find a buyer, I won't make enough on the deal to pay the real estate commission. You can have it as soon as I move out. I'll sign whatever paperwork you have. John, I also have a small favor to ask. What is it, Catherine? Is there any way you can arrange for me and the kids to meet? It's no big deal, but still, I'm their mother, and I'd really like to see them once in a while. I'm sure I can think of something. 2 days later, Catherine got her $2,000, and I took title to the house and the mortgage. Rob had no problem getting information on possible parents. Getting DNA information was a little more difficult, but not impossible. Ray Thorenson was a high school teacher in Altoona. All state employees were required to have their DNA data. These files were not available to the general public, but Rob had no trouble figuring out how to get what he needed. Ray Thorenson was not Rob's father. Philip Berger was an employee of the Ohio prison system. Phil seemed to like young girls who, according to the state, shouldn't sleep with men who were fit to be their fathers. It's not for me to judge, but I was glad to learn of Philip's whereabouts. Of course, all men of Philip's caliber are in the database. I don't know how Rob got access to it, but it was eventually revealed that Phil was not Rob's father. If Catherine was being honest with me, that meant that Kyle Simmons had to be the man. The search continued. Seymour Schlump and I had gone to high school together. Seymour went to Dickerson and was pursuing a law degree when I enrolled at Pennsylvania State University. Seymour and law were not a marriage made in heaven. He was not the most accurate arrow in the quiver. In fact, he was, to put it mildly, sloppy. He was, however, the perfect candidate for our project. Taking advantage of Nittany Lions alumni news and fraternity web pages, we found Lieutenant Colonel Simmons at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. Kyle was an important person at the college and seemed to have made a career out of it. Abby had a cousin who served in the Pennsylvania National Guard who was able to get Kyle's DNA data. We got a match. Houston, we're ready to launch. Catherine left home by the end of the week. Instead of paying off the late mortgage payments, I simply refinanced the whole thing, crossing Catherine's name off all the paperwork. I moved back into the house, but the kids wanted to stay in Frackville for the rest of the school year. Rob wanted to stay to be near Shannon. I think I wanted to be near Abby, but there were still a lot of things that needed to be done. I was amazed at the poor job Catherine's attorney did. It would have been very easy for him to determine that I hadn't quit my job, just taken a vacation. It turned out that he never checked. I was under the impression that he had used a divorce form that he had downloaded from the internet. I was still a few months away from the final decision, but I didn't expect there to be any problems. The worst part of my return to work was Rob losing his college scholarship. The good part was that I could pay my tuition or get a loan. Abby worked in an office that billed doctors. It was a 9-to-5 job, 5 days a week. I started spending all my weekends in Frackville. Rob and Shannon got along great, but there was one small snag. Shannon spent a lot of time with Darcy and Donna. It was mostly shopping trips, but Rob wasn't thrilled about sharing her with anyone. Abby and I found it amusing in a good way. For some reason, Abby and I acted more like friends than ex-lovers. Neither of us seemed ready to take the first step toward intimacy. Seymour had flooded the court system with every document he could think of. He was working with a shotgun theory. He figured that if he filed enough lawsuits against Simmons, 1 or 2 of them might stick. He also hoped that at least one of them would partially plead guilty so he could get the paycheck he was owed. I didn't pay him a dime, but he didn't seem to mind as long as he had his share. I didn't want any litigation, but it would be nice if we could pay for Rob's college tuition. It would have made it easier when the girls started school. Things were still the same for Rob and me. The DNA issue didn't seem to bother either of us. Rob was just happy that he wasn't Shannon's brother. I was happy that I was her father. but I wished I had spent more time with her when she was growing up. She basically got caught up in the whole thing, but didn't seem to be upset about it. Life was starting to get better. I got the house in order, but I couldn't stand living alone. Rob and Shannon had finished school and were both working. In 2 months, Rob was going to go to state college. Shannon was going to start a 2-year program at Reading Area Community College in some kind of medical administration major. Catherine had called from Baltimore. The relationship between her and her parents was not going well. She was still living with her sister and couldn't afford to buy her own place. She was having trouble finding a job because of bad references from her last employer. She regretted everything and wished she could take it all back. She hoped that I could forgive her. Although forgiveness on my part was out of the question, she was happy to hear that the girls were planning a trip to Baltimore to see her. The conversation ended on a high note. By the end of the summer, my life began to get better. The divorce was final and no conditions were required. Kyle Simmons acknowledged Rob's paternity on the advice of his attorney. In lieu of a monetary award, it was agreed that Kyle would pay all of Rob's college expenses for 4 years. In the end, Kyle also paid Seymour's fees. To make matters worse for good old Kyle, his wife filed for divorce, which included her entitlement to 49% of Kyle's upcoming pension. Using simple math, Kyle's wife determined that Rob had been conceived just 4 weeks before her wedding. Coupled with several other unwise behaviors over the years, this proved to be the straw that broke the camel's back. The most pleasant surprise was Abby's arrival at the house. It was too late for dinner, but perfect for a bottle of wine. She didn't have much to say until we got comfortable. "John, I need a favor." I liked the way she started the conversation because I felt obligated to her and wanted to do something for her. Shannon will be starting classes in a few weeks, and I'm not thrilled about her having to commute, especially in the winter, through the mountains. I was wondering if it would be difficult if she stayed here with you. Sure. The girls are coming back, and I think they'll all get along just fine. There is one other problem. We've never been apart before, and I'm hesitant to leave her alone. She won't be alone. I'll be here, and so will the girls. By the look of annoyance on her face, I knew I'd said the wrong thing. I'm sorry, Abby. I guess that was the wrong answer. I can see you were expecting something else. Can you help me? I swear, John Rochelle, you're the dumbest person I know. I'm not going to let you off the hook again. I'm going to sit here until you figure this out. Pour me some more wine. It only took me 5 seconds to realize what was going on. Before I finished pouring her wine, I was already grinning from ear to ear. Epilogue. Well, everything worked out the way it was supposed to. Rob is doing well at the University of Pennsylvania and comes home every chance he gets. Shannon has excellent grades and will graduate 6 months early. Donna has been accepted to James Madison University in Virginia with a good scholarship. Darcy is still undecided on a college. Abby, Mrs. Rischel, owns a small medical practice that covers 3 counties. She hopes that Shannon will be ready to replace her when the baby is born. We drink a lot of lemonade. As a famous English writer always says, life goes on.